Good morning from Austin, Texas. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm going to talk to you about something today that's very close to my heart that I've had to walk through since I was very young. I think my life would have looked a lot different emotionally if I had understood how to draw and enforce emotional boundaries. And I can tell you from talking to people for over a decade about infidelity, betrayal, addiction, whether they're unfaithful or whether they're betrayed, emotional boundaries are essential for how we live our life. For what you're going through right now, I can tell you that emotional boundaries, when they are properly drawn and implemented, can be a true change to your entire recovery and your relationship. I think we get in a lot of trouble when we don't have emotional boundaries. We let people walk on us. We might even break other people's emotional boundaries and cause pain and cause hurt. I know that if I had more emotional boundaries in my life, I would have not suffered as much pain and distress and even dysregulation in my life. And I know that if I had respected emotional boundaries of others, I wouldn't have caused as much pain and hurt and distress in other people. Here are a few observations about boundaries that you can kind of chew on before I get into the meat of today's video. Proper emotional boundaries define what is me and what is not me. What is my responsibility and what is not my responsibility. What is my fault and what is not my fault. Boundaries are where I end and someone else begins, which leads me to a proper, congruent, and healthy and satisfying relationship. One author said, "Good boundaries keep the good in and the bad out." Setting proper emotional boundaries ultimately leads us to taking responsibility for our choices, our actions, our consequences, and ultimately our outcomes. One therapist put it this way: you either have a strong internal locus of control or you have a strong external locus of control. It's very similar to what you've heard before, which is the internal self-reference, which just really kind of boils down to this. When people say things about you, do you crumble? Do you fall apart? Do you feel like your world spirals because you have an external locus of control? Because they dictate how you feel internally. Do they dictate who you are, how secure you feel, how beautiful you feel, how strong you feel, how accomplished you feel? Or does that come from the internal locus of control? At this point, you may be wondering, Sam, where are we going? How are we tying this into infidelity? Because here's the rub. If you are dealing with an unfaithful spouse that starts to say things like, well, you never paid attention to me, and you always made me feel demeaned and devalued, and you didn't want to be intimate with me, and I could never make you happy, so that's why I had an affair. And if you don't have a strong internal locus of control, you can start to believe that. And you can start to feel like their affair is your responsibility. Then you talk to someone who's maybe very inexperienced as a therapist or pastor or authority type figure, and they've not been through infidelity, or maybe they have very little experience, and they start heaping on you, and I'm sorry, this crap of, you know what, you should have done this, you should have done this, and they should you to death. And you kind of start to believe that. And now you're spiraling because you don't have a boundary, and you start to believe this nonsense that is not true. And that's where I have to tell you, I see so much damage happen. We damage ourselves, we damage others, we allow others to damage us because we don't have emotional boundaries to protect us. And the truth of it is, you're 100% responsible for 50% of the marriage. Today I want to help you because I really believe that if we can use these emotional boundaries, we can find freedom. We can find healing. We can enjoy a level of freedom that we may not know right now, that while we may be going through incredible hurt and pain due to infidelity or addiction, these internal boundaries, these emotional boundaries can change our life and change the lives of people around us. Here's how we do it. Number one, if you or your partner get hysterical over something that's going on, it's probably because you or your partner are getting historical, meaning there is unhealed pain, unhealed hurt, unhealed damage from your history. And the right therapist, the right program, the right pathway can bring in healing. But that is boundaried-less pain and hurt. And so what happens is anytime that pain gets tapped into, because there isn't an emotional boundary around that, you or your partner become hysterical. It's very similar to what one trauma therapist said, which is whenever you encounter a $10,000 reaction to a $500 problem, that's trauma. That's typically historical, and it needs to be healed. And an emotional boundary comes in where if you are on the other side of that, you can be able to say, hey, wait, I'm just trying to talk about X, Y, or Z. It sounds like we've tapped into something that's much bigger than maybe this moment. And you're able to stand up for yourself. You're able to process it and say, hey, I'm happy to talk about this in a safe environment, but I think we've tapped into something much bigger than just X. Now, if you're on the other side, and maybe your partner has said something to you and you get hysterical because you're probably being historical, maybe from their own choices or adolescence or childhood neglect or wounding or what have you, but in that moment, a good boundary for you would be able to go, okay, I need to hear what my partner's saying and think about this a little bit. It doesn't mean that I need to just believe them 100%, but I can go to my therapist. I can go to this proven pathway and get feedback on it. Which leads me to my next point, which is this. You have to know yourself very well to draw an emotional boundary. For example, your unfaithful spouse may revert to lashing out, blaming, attacking, putting it on you. Or they may come to the point where I've talked to so many of you recently who have said, my unfaithful just keeps telling me to get over it and move on, stop talking about it. And they shame you, maybe inadvertently or directly. They shame you. When you have an emotional boundary, you can say, hold on. That's not true. I can't keep living like this. I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. And I'm not going to fight fire with fire and shame you back and lash out and go back and forth. I have a boundary here. I'm not going to play this game because I know what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for. I'm not getting drugged through the mud with you. I'm not going to play this game. I'm going to enforce this emotional boundary that protects me and keeps me safe, that keeps the bad out and the good in, that protects me from going down all of these steps I know that I will be taken down that will hurt me and damage me and cause me to not sleep and not feel well and go through all this triggering, traumatizing process. Because if I can hold this emotional boundary, I can protect myself. And I might even be able to protect my partner from what's coming their way if I don't have this boundary in place. My next example piggybacks right after that, which is we have to be able to protect ourselves from what we would call violent communication. Maybe not physical violence, but the attacking, the shaming, the demeaning, devaluing verbiage or behavior or stonewalling. And that has to be protected against. Alternatively, you might be that person that exhibits those behaviors, but you also know through working on your own recovery what makes you want to do that. I've learned some things about myself. When I feel X, Y, or Z, it makes me want to lash out this way or get defensive that way or boundary up in an incongruent way, such as stonewalling or hiding or turtling up. But now that I know myself and now that I've done so much work, I can understand, I'm I'm not going to let this person, this feedback, cause me to get insecure, get upset, get defensive. Now, if there's truth in it, you know what? I'm going to ask other people. I'm going to think about it. I come from faith, so I may pray about it. I'll evaluate it and say, hey, I think maybe I have an issue. Or no, that's just them projecting onto me. But when I have that boundary in place, I can hold firm. And I don't have to go tit for tat. And I don't have to continue to get into these lashing out discussions. And I don't have to let them project their stuff on me and then own it. I don't have to own their stuff. I hope you'll keep going today. As I drove in today, I thought about so many of you, whether it be people that reach out continually or people that I don't even really know very well, but you watch my videos and every now and then you'll send a comment. I thought about all of you, and I know that it's hard to live this recovery life. I know that I'm not perfect. Sometimes I may say some things that don't always sit well. Sometimes I say some things that really help. Here's what I care about. Can you keep going? Can you refuse to quit on you? Have a good day.